It's the boys from Minnesota back at it again. Hot takes from Nels, Tyler, Josh, and Ben. From the first batter up to the safe clinch, you bitch. Get up out your seats, it's swing and a miss.
Welcome into another special episode of Swing and a Miss. We are joined today by Savannah Bananas right-handed pitcher, Frank Moscatiello. Frank, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here and looking forward to some fun conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is only the second time we've gotten to talk to a professional baseball player, so we're really excited about this.
As am I.
Wonderful. Where do we find you at today? Are you in Georgia or are you somewhere across the country?
Yeah. So you caught me on a good day. I'm in Georgia. It's 100,000 degrees here and I love every second of it.
Now, we used to live in Atlanta, and when we moved to Minnesota, we got used to the colder climate. And then when we went back to Atlanta to visit in July, a couple of years after we moved, and we're like, oh yeah, we made the right choice.
Yeah, it's crazy going, all around the country because, we were in Minnesota 2 weeks ago and it was warm, but it wasn't like crazy hot. And then this past weekend we were in Colorado and you saw people, it was raining, but you saw a lot of sleeves, a lot of hoodies, a lot of people are bundling up.
Yep. Well, I think Nels is going to kick us off tonight. So Nels, if you want to go right ahead, we'll dive right into this. Okay, Frank?
Sounds good.
Yeah. You spent, your entire baseball career kind of auditioning for the next level, right? So you're in high school, you're trying to get into college ball, you're in college ball, you're trying to get noticed by the pros, you're in independence, you're trying to get into affiliated baseball. Are you out of the point now where you're kind of done auditioning and you're really set where you're at as a Savannah Banana?
Well, if you're asking if I found somewhere that I enjoy being, the answer is yes. I love it here and I would love to do this for the rest of my life, but I still feel like every day is an audition, because, Savannah Bananas are going to keep growing. We're going to become worldwide at some point. Everybody's going to want to join, so I have to make sure that I am, just better than everybody else at, that's not here, in every way possible, whether it's the on the field performance, whether it's the off the field fan interactions, there's so much more that goes into, being a good banana ball player than just being a good professional baseball player because, all my career, from high school to pro ball, it's always been, judged based on, stats and how good are you at baseball, and that's it's still judged here. It's not like these guys are really good baseball players. Close to everybody has come from pro ball or, top D1 or, some sort of like baseball background. And, it's not just a walk in the park. If it was that easy, I'd have a 0 ERA and throw every weekend. I don't. These guys are ballers. And I actually think that this might be a little more difficult, than pitching in pro ball, in other ways, because you have to worry about the entertainment aspect. You have to worry about the game clock. There's another stat that's called MPI, which is minutes per inning, that is super important here because we only have a 2-hour time limit. And, minutes per inning is just how quickly can you get 3 outs? You go into the game, play ball, they start the timer. And as soon as that third out is recorded, bang, timer off for your MPI. But, between innings, the game clock is still running, so technically we only have, if we have an hour's worth of entertainment, we only have an hour to play 9 innings, so that MPI is super important, and when you're a fan and you're told, all right, we're going to go watch 9 innings of baseball and we only get through 7, because the game clock ran out, then, fans aren't happy and neither is Jesse. So that's why MPI is super important. And, that's something that I struggled with at first. I think I'm getting the hang of it here in the second half. It's difficult, but, it's something that I worked on and I'm continuing to work on just to, again, become a better banana ball pitcher, because it's not just based on strikeouts and, so there's other things that go into, being a good banana baller.
I want to touch on kind of what you just said. How do you balance working on your, standard pitching performance versus everything else that goes on to banana ball, as far as the choreography, the fan interaction, doing the skits, and even just on game day, you guys are on your feet from 2-3 hours before open, the whole of the game on the field, and then hanging out after. So even if you're not, pitching more than an inning or two, your legs still need to be like fairly shot at the end of the day, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it's crazy to think about, but the days so as a pitcher, before each game, we get a list of hot arms, who's available to pitch that day. And I think more of my tiring days are the days when I'm not even on that list, when I don't even put my cleats on, because we are so fans first. Like, that's the name of the company, Fans First Entertainment. My paychecks don't come from Banana Ball or Jesse Cole. It comes from Fans First Entertainment. And, that is super important to this organization. And I love every second of it, because even in pro ball, I was a guy that interacted with fans. In 2023, when I was playing pro ball in Canada, I was pitcher of the year, which was based on just performance alone. And then I was also community player of the year for the Quebec Capitals, because I was very, fans first, when I didn't even know what fans first was, just because that's just the type of person I am, and so on a day that I'm not available to pitch, I'll be, up in the stands in the 300 levels. We do promotions where, at the beginning of the game, we find a fan and a little girl, and we give a rose to them. And it's like our Love Is in the Air, One Less Lonely Girl plays by Justin Bieber. And, all the players that aren't playing, they go into the stands and they, walk around like they're looking for love. And, we always find like a little sweet little girl and we give them a rose, and, but someone's got to be up in the, the 400 section, so usually, because it takes a little longer to get there, they'll pick relief pitchers that aren't playing that day, or backups, and I'm a guy where, all the on-field promotion workers, like, I go up to them, hey, you need somebody to go to the roof, tell me when, you need me to go here, you need me to go there. Like, I'm just here to serve for my company, and just to be fans first and, just make people happy. It's my job to not only pitch, but also follow the fans first, motto, and to help, even on days where I don't pitch, I'm still a huge factor into the show, because, the fans that are up in the roof section, they don't get the best view, but, and maybe they won't be able to get any autographs after the game because, all the players are gone by the time they get down to the field, or maybe they showed up late and they couldn't get to the signings pregame. So seeing a player that just appears, in the 400 section, it's the reactions that you get from the fans, it's unbelievable. Like they act like you're like a ghost. Like, oh my gosh, like, are you a player? Like, what are you doing up here? Like, you're supposed to be on the field, and it's just, those are the fans first moments that we are trying to create, because, when, if you show up to the game and you're in the roof, you're like, like, this kind of stinks, in any like sporting event or show, you go to a concert and you're in the 700 section. It's like, oh, I mean, like I got to stream the concert in order to hear this guy, you know, but in Banana Ball, it doesn't matter what section you're sitting in. We're going to create a fans first moment for everybody. You know, our goal as backups for the day is to, you know, create fans first moments and find that section of people that they thought that they weren't going to see anybody or meet anybody. And then, you know, you pop up and, you know, everyone goes crazy, you know, and so that's why, you know, we were able to sell out 100,000 people stadiums, you know, because they know that it doesn't matter which section you're sitting in, you're going to get a great show, and it's going to be very, you know, interactive with the players and, you know, the band and the cast and, you know, everybody that you see on the field. Usually you're going to see somebody that's dressed like them, you know, like you might not see the starting pitcher in the stands, you know, because, you know, they're busy and like, you know, but, you know, the next day, you know, they're going to be up there, you know, you're going to see the Bananas, you're going to see the band, you're going to see the other teams, you know, cast members, you know, you're going to see Princess Potassia up there, you know, Split's going to be up there, you know, everyone's walking around the stadium trying to make, you know, special moments for fans that, you know, don't get that first row or second row, you know, access.
So kind of building on that, you guys get to work with a lot of cool celebrities a lot that come and join you. So like you were mentioning that you were just in Colorado. I was watching the videos of Kristen Bell, you know, singing down gals and stuff. How cool is it to be able to work with all of these like kind of random celebrities that just want to be a part of the show as well for you?
Yeah. I mean, when Kristen Bell showed up, it was like, wow, like that's unbelievable, you know, and then hearing her sing and, you know, her and Derek Klena, you know, they put on a show that, you know, that's just, it was unbelievable. And just being a part of that to me was super, you know, it was such a blessing, and it was just super cool just because of, you know, how cool those people are. You know, Derek Klena, who's been on Broadway, and, you know, Kristen Bell, who's like, she's Kristen Bell. You know, she's an A-list celebrity.
Do you guys get any heads up that a celebrity like that is going to be in the building that night?
Yeah. So sometimes we'll get a little heads up, you know, like we're not allowed to like talk about it. And, you know, we always, you know, if it's like a big time celebrity, like, for example, when we were in New Orleans and Drew Brees showed up, we were all in the clubhouse, and we're all sitting in there, you know, before the game. And Jesse Cole walks in. He's like, "Hey guys, you know, we got another guest here that wants to hang out. Drew Brees, come in here." And we're like, "Did you just say like Drew Brees?" Like, and that guy's like a legend, you know. And it's just every time we, you know, it's unbelievable, you know, the people that come to the games, and, you know, just it's so cool, you know, like being able to, you know, meet these people. And, you know, maybe I don't get to talk to or like personally meet every single one of them, you know, because sometimes I just don't want to bother them, and, you know, they got cameras all around them, and, you know, just professionalism, just not bothering them in their moments, you know. But, you know, I'll always have a picture of me background dancing for Kristen Bell, or who was the other, the dancer that came out when we were in Oregon. He came out, and I held him up and spun around, you know. I forget what his name is, and I feel so terrible like not knowing it, because it was like a big name guy. He was like a dancer. He was a dancer, and, you know, super cool, super nice guy, super talented. But, you know, that's another guy that I have a video of me holding his leg up while he's spinning around, you know, like I have a picture with Jabba Chamberlain, and, you know, a picture with Drew Brees, and it's just so many insanely, you know, respected people and insanely famous people. You know, it's a blessing, you know, it's super cool. And they're all super nice. And, you know, they even like come to us, and they thank us for allowing them to, you know, do what they do. And I'm like, really? Like, you know who you are. Like this is an honor.
So I assume there's quite a balance between what you're doing now in professional baseball versus what you expected to be doing in professional baseball. And how do you take a look at what young Frank wanted to do in pro baseball and balance it against with what you're doing currently?
Mm-hmm. So ever since I was younger, we had, worksheets and assignments growing up that said, what do you want to do when you grow older? And every time I said, I want to play for the New York Yankees, and I saw something recently, and it was from a player in this organization. I don't remember who it was, but, it was responding to, because we get a lot of hate online, because people don't understand what we're actually trying to do. Our goal is to spread happiness, to spread joy, make people fall in love with the game of baseball, and just have everybody come together and just, be happy for a night, and just forget about work, forget about, everything else. Let's just bring happiness to the world. That's our goal. We're not claiming to be big leaguers. We're not claiming to be as good as big leaguers, because I've played with a ton of big leaguers and those guys are different. Those guys throw 100 miles an hour at the ball 7,000 feet, and they do it whenever they want, but that's not who we're comparing ourselves to. We're not comparing ourselves to anybody. We're just trying to do our own thing. Banana ball is a completely different thing. And, when we get hate, it's from people that don't understand what we are actually trying to do, and, all these other leagues that are, trying to spread happiness, I think it's great, spread happiness. We're going to focus on us, but if you're making people happy, I'm all for it, and, back to the original question, I saw somebody respond and say, maybe I'm not doing what I wanted to do when I was younger. Maybe I'm not playing for the New York Yankees, but I got to play in Yankee Stadium in front of a sold out crowd. I get to, play at that stadium in front of my family. Maybe I'm not wearing pinstripes, but I'm wearing a baseball jersey. I got to pitch at Yankee Stadium. I got to, my family got to see me pitch at Yankee Stadium, in front of 70,000 people, and I think that's really what we fell in love with, the thrill of pitching in front of a giant crowd, and it's funny. I was on the plane the other day and I was sitting next to a guy who told me he went to a concert, and he was like, yeah, this guy, he sold out, Broncos Stadium, 75,000 people, 2 nights in a row, he sold them out. He's like, that's so sick. I'm like, yeah, man, it must be cool to like sell out stadiums, like he didn't know who I was, and I didn't want to, I was just, kind of just like joking around with him. Like, yeah, it must be cool to play in front of 70,000 people 2 nights in a row. Huh? Like what a rush that might be.
It's gotta be wild to keep that to yourself.
Yeah. And they're like, yeah. Cause like I walk around with my family sometimes. They're like, oh, like you should tell them like that you're a banana. And I was like, no, Mom, like I don't want to do that right now. I'm extremely proud to be a banana. And, if I could walk around with a sign that said I play for the Savannah Bananas everywhere I go, I would represent that organization as best as I could and, do it with pride, because that's how, ecstatic I am to be a Savannah Banana, and this organization, it means the world to me because, in more ways than not, like I think that this organization may have saved my life and, gave me my second wind and my second love for baseball. That's because in pro ball, it becomes very, toxic and competitive, and everyone's trying to make it to the next level. So nobody's really rooting for their teammates in a way, and people could say, oh no, like we're playing for the team, but if you are on a team and you're a pitcher and 4 pitchers on your staff got picked up and you didn't, you're upset. You're happy for them, but you're upset. Here, there is no competition between teammates. There's no other than like competing against each other on the field. We're not competing with each other. we all have the same mindset of we want to put on the best show possible for these fans so that they have the best time ever. And they tell all their friends and family, and then we continue to sell out these stadiums, continue to spread happiness, continue to make people smile. And, we get to do this for many, many, many more years, because, that means that we're doing a great job of what our goal is. And, we're all happy. We still have jobs. And, I think it's a win-win for the world, because once we go worldwide, like it's not just a US thing. Then we'll go to Mexico, we'll go to Canada, we'll go to Puerto Rico, who knows where we're going to go. I think, the way that Jesse Cole and his wife, Emily, have grew this organization and this business, I know that we're going to be overseas at some point. And, I think sky's the limit here, and it's just super cool to be a part of this, whether this is my only year or I'm here for 10 years. This was or is some of the coolest moments that I'll remember forever. And it's a blessing, because there's so many people that want to do this. And, you could tell just from the tryouts. Last year I think there was 6 tryouts, and there was I want to say 88 picks. And thousands of people sent in applications to go to the tryouts. And then there was 6 tryouts with probably about 30 guys at each. And then there was 150 guys that got selected for the draft. And then 80 guys got selected in the draft. So
it's not a lot.
No, not at all. And, now even next year with, how much more we're growing, like Kristen Bell, and we're selling out all these stadiums and everybody knows who we are. And, we're all predicting a MLB lockout next year, which, it seems kind of obvious that that's going to be the route that the MLB goes. And we're going to be the only, entertainment that's the only baseball that's being played, indie ball and minor league ball, maybe, but like who's going to be playing in those stadiums,
Mm-hmm. Can you, going back to the tryouts, can you kind of walk through what that process is? And then maybe a side question of that is, if you've had some former major leaguers in banana ball, would somebody of that caliber have to go through that process as well?
So, yeah, I could go into that. So I was getting ready to retire from baseball, and one of my buddies told me that he's going to a Savannah Bananas tryout. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And I was like, you know what? This buddy of mine, he played minor league ball. He's probably one of the top pitchers in this league right now. And he's got a great story too. He's a D3 guy. His name's David Griffin. He's a D3 guy, went to indie ball, got picked up by the Mets, and then made it up to AAA, pitched in some big league camp games, and now he's in banana ball. And he's one of the best pitchers here, probably. But he told me that he was going to a tryout, and I was like, oh, like, dude played in AAA, like if he could, put his ego on the side and join something like this, because from the outside in, it's kind of weird, and, as a professional baller, but then I was like, you know what, I'll give it a shot, so I sent an email to the recruiting director, Barry Aldridge, and I was like, hey, this is what I've done in my baseball career. I want to try out. And he said, okay, you could come to Dallas or LA. We have tryouts on this day and this day. And it was like 6 days away. And I was like, oh, okay, we'll see. We'll see which one I go to. And so I went to Dallas, and I showed up, and the first thing we did was dance. They're like, listen, you're going to dance. In the email they actually sent to us, they said, hey, you're going to dance. If you're scared to dance in front of us when there's no crowd there, just remember, like, when you're not out there doing this with us during the season because you were too scared to dance a little bit, you're going to be very upset. So it's kind of like, hey, put your ego on the side and shake it a little bit, like get loose. So we got there, and they put us through like a little dance, and in the in the email, they said, hey, as a pitcher, you're going to be doing this dance when you pitch. So learn it. I was like, okay. So then went to the tryout, danced a little bit. You know, they did batting practice, and, you know, it was, everybody else was just, they were like, hey, go have fun. You know, everybody's running around doing trick plays. You know, I'm catching the ball behind my back, you know, like, and it was some of the most fun that I've ever had, you know, playing baseball. And it came for a really tough time for me. You know, it was just, you know, tough timing for me personally. And it helped me, you know, forget about a lot of things, and just, it was some of the most fun I've had in a long time. And then after that, you know, they told us that they were going to give us a call and tell us that we're either going to make it in the draft or we're going to go a different way, and you don't have a chance of getting picked up in the draft. You know, so they had to cut down the numbers of people from the tryout to a draft size. So they ended up calling me and said, hey, we liked what we saw. You know, we want to enter you in the draft. This doesn't mean that you're going to be a banana baller, but you have a chance to get selected. If you get selected, are you going to say yes? I said, yes. They said, okay, wait for a couple emails. You know, there's going to be a couple emails before the draft. And, you know, if you get a phone call from some coaches, you know, they might show some interest. So, okay, cool. So the Bananas called me, and then there was another team that called me. And I was like, okay, so 2 teams are interested, you know, but, you know, still, you know, they could have called every single player that was in the draft, you know? So knowing how, you know, big banana ball is, and, you know, knowing that, you know, pitching and talent alone isn't the only thing that means something in banana ball, I had no expectations. I had no idea if I was going to get picked up. I didn't know what they were looking for. You know, because there were some people there that were wearing onesies, you know, they were wearing like luchador outfits, you know, everybody just dressed crazy. And I was wearing baseball clothes. You know, I was wearing a Lululemon t-shirt, one of my winter ball hats that had a monkey on it. And just because it was fun. And I wore baseball pants and cleats, you know, so the only thing that I had was a monkey on my hat, but that was like an actual team that I played for. So I went there and I just, you know, I pitched. I faced 6 batters. I struck out 4 of them, and I got 2 pop-ups, and I hit somebody before he popped up. But but I pitched well, you know, but I didn't have like a talent, you know, like I don't sing, you know, I'm not a very good dancer, you know, at that time. You know, now I'm like Chris Brown. I got the moves. But like I went to it and I was like, I don't know what to do, you know, so I just played baseball. And then once I signed with the Bananas, I went and I learned how to do a backflip, you know, because I think, you know, acrobats is cool. You know, I'm athletic, you know, I think that's something that I enjoy doing, you know, and, you know, you can never have too many people that could do flips because, you know, Jesse thinks flips are cool. I think flips are really cool. And, you know, if that's something that's going to keep me around and, you know, give him a reason to put me on screen or like use something that I know how to do, then I'll do it, you know.
And I can confirm flips are pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, Frank, I don't know if you can tell by looking at the 4 of us, all 4 of us, great back flippers.
Yeah.
Hey, give me a trampoline and I can nail it, but on solid ground, no chance.
We went to one of the guys on our team, his girlfriend is one of the coaches at Iowa's gymnastics team. And we went and we hung out with them, and we were in their gymnastics gym, and it was really cool. Like we were doing like floor routines. We were doing round off backflips. You know, we were doing flips. We were jumping into the ball pit. You know, we were doing like trampoline stuff, and, you know, they even showed us some of the things that they could do. And it's so cool, honestly. Yeah. Like they were very talented. Like there was one girl there that did like the round off flip, but then she did I think she did a triple flip.
Wow.
Maybe it was 2. I don't know if it was 3. That sounds kind of crazy, but she did 2 and then she landed it. And I was like, yeah, it's so impressive. You know, it's just so cool. Like I think when I see people do stuff that I don't know how to do, I think it's so impressive. Like hearing Derek Klena sing, like I go up to him every time he sings. I'm like, dude, you sound so good. Like, or like seeing like those gymnasts do flips. I'm like, wow, like I'm like amazed. Or like there's a guy here that does magic and he like does magic tricks. I was like, wow, like I'm just staring. And I think and that's the cool thing about Banana Ball, because it's not just a bunch of really good baseball players. You know, it's some guys that are some really good baseball players, but everybody's got some other talent. You know, like there's magicians, there's guys that are just really, really jacked. You know, there's guys that are really good dancers. You know, there's just so many different, I guess, backgrounds all brought together that it's so cool just to learn the way that people grew up and like what their story is. Because there's no two same stories in Banana Ball.
Tyler, do you want to go ahead and show him your magic trick?
I don't have any magic tricks, but would you say right now that there's more friendly competition on the team as far as, you know, reaching a velocity or pitch design? Or would it be adding in an extra element as far as getting better at dance, or adding another one of those entertainment-centric skills?
I would say that the competition between teammates is probably more on the entertainment side. You know, we're all trying to help each other with the baseball side, but, you know, pitch design and, you know, velocity and stuff like that is important in pro ball. We don't talk about it at all. You know, like we talk about, like, we don't have radar guns. You know, we just, the main goal of a pitcher is to throw the ball in the strike zone. You know, if you got to throw it underhand and you're not giving up a bunch of homers, like throw it underhand, just put the ball in the strike zone. You know, and that's where the MPI comes into place, because, you know, we don't just have walks. You know, when you walk somebody here, it's called a ball four sprint. And so ball four, batter takes off. They could keep running as much as they can. Usually the most that they get is a double until the entire defense touches the ball. So they got to throw the ball around. The outfielders all come in and corral around second base, and, you know, they just patty cake the ball back and forth. And then if the guy's running, you tag him. If you get him before he's on the base, he's out. If he stays at first, you know, it's just a walk. You know, but it puts more pressure on the pitcher because a walk is a double. You know, and then think about this. You know, there's a guy in our league his name is Kyle Martin. He's got 27 home runs, I think. He's leading the league. He's like 10 over the past record. You got a guy like Kyle Martin up to bat, and it's 2-0, right? Usually in pro ball, you know, you would throw a breaking ball in the dirt. You know, hopefully he swings. You know, if he doesn't swing, it's 3-0. All right, we're going to walk him. We got first and second now. Now, guy on second base, you walk a guy, that guy scores every single time. He could crawl because, you know, they're throwing the ball around. They can't throw it home until everybody touches it. You know, that guy keeps running as much as he wants to. So that's where throwing strikes is even more important. You know, and the way that the scoring system works here, every inning counts as a point. So if you go in the top, did you guys golf? You guys know what skins is?
Yeah.
That's the way the scoring system works here. So if you go in the top half of the inning, you don't score a run. You know, you could go out in the bottom half, first pitch homer, inning over, you know, top half hits again. That's 1-0. But also, if you go in the top half, you put up 7 runs, and then you go out and you give up 0 runs. Now it's 1-0. You know, it's not 7-0. Mm-hmm. You know, each inning except for the 9th inning counts as 1 point. If you go in the 9th inning, you score 14 runs, that's 14 points. But in every other inning, you're just trying to outscore the other team. Right. You know, so, you know, you go in the top half and you shut them out, you know, and there's no runs. And then there's a guy on second, you walk somebody, that's a walk-off walk because the guy on second just scored. You know, so inning over. But it also helps players with pitch count, because you could go out and 3 innings in a row, give up a first pitch homer after not scoring in the top half, and then that's inning over. You just got 3 innings you lost 3 innings, but your pitch count, you only gained 3 pitches.
Does that help your MPI too?
So I'm not sure what the ruling is about the MPI and walk-off innings. I think it pauses And then until you get that next out, like if you got 2 outs and then you get walked off on, I think it pauses. And then until you get your next out, then it stops. But I could be completely wrong about that. I could be making that up, but that's what I think it is.
Needless to say, you don't get walked off very much.
Or we could just say, I don't know how MPI works.
It sounds better the way Josh said it. I'd go with that one.
You have a educational background. That's what you studied in college. At least that's what our crack research team brought to me here.
Yes, I got a degree in education from birth to grade 6 with a focus in English and special ed.
That's excellent. My wife is a teacher of that exact age range, so a lot of respect to learning that. Have you been able to kind of meld that educational background and all that studying you did for that with banana ball and teaching that game out? Because you just went through, there's a lot of different rules, a lot of different ways it's played than traditional baseball. Have you been able to use that background, and has that been able to help you teach the game out?
Yeah, absolutely. Because before I was here, I was a preschool teacher, so I feel like I've worked with kids my entire life. I almost feel like banana ball was created for me, because, I like to hang out with the kids. I could pitch kind of good, and, the off the field stuff for me is awesome. I go to all the children's hospitals. I volunteer for every, volunteer event. I like to give back, because not everybody is as fortunate as us. And we get to play a kid's game and get paid for it, and without the help of all these kids and fans, none of this is possible, because the second people stop showing up is the second when we all have to, go find something else to do, because then it's not as, it doesn't make sense, but yeah, I think that, working at the preschool and, my education background, it helps a lot, because you're around kids and like the entire time. And, it teaches, it really helped me know how to, I guess, not communicate, but maneuver around, I guess, some stuff at the stadiums and like fans and stuff, it teaches us how to interact in certain ways, and the right things to say and, at the right times. And, sometimes, you see a kid who's kind of shy, and you have to figure, and that's when those fans' first moments really come into play, because the kids, like, they look at us like we're superheroes, they get so starstruck, and I feel like I'm a nobody, especially around these guys, we'll go to, signings and I'll be standing there and people will run right past me to get to some of these other people, they'll look at me and they'll be like, excuse me. So which is fine. These guys, they all earned it. Everybody started at a certain level and, this is my first year. So I got to build up a fan base, which is okay. But, it's funny because you sometimes you meet a kid who's shy, sometimes you meet a kid who's nonverbal, like families will, I'll interact with a child and, the parents will be like, oh, thank you. She's autistic. So this or that. And, I'll connect with them. I'll be like, oh, I studied special ed in college. I have, my dad's best friend's daughter is, is autistic and, we see her very often, I interact with her all the time. And, it definitely taught me a lot and it has benefited me a lot in this way.
That's great.
For this job.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm going to give you 2 options. You get 2 paths. So you get to either go and have an opportunity like Jackson Olsen just did by getting cast on Dancing with the Stars. Doesn't have to be Dancing in the Stars, but it's something like that.
Okay.
Or I can give you a 3-year career as a middle reliever on a pro ball team. Which one would you prefer?
Wow, that's a great question.
So essentially, baseball entertainment.
I mean, I've always been a baller. You know, baseball is my first love. You know, if I get a chance to be a big leaguer, you know, I mean, right now, if you told me, hey, I'll get you a contract to go to the big leagues, you know, it would be hard for me to give up what I'm doing right now. But I don't know what I would say because it's a very hard decision. But I absolutely love what I'm doing right now. I'd say if I could go play in the big leagues versus Dancing with the Stars, I'd probably say the big leagues. But
it wouldn't have to be Dancing in the Stars. It would be your own
Survivor.
Thing. It could be it could be like getting cast in a movie, or you know, being a part of a sitcom, or you know,
yeah, I mean,
whatever it would be.
I love baseball, you know. So if I get to continue to play baseball, you know, I think I'm going to choose that, you know. But like I said, this banana ball, I love this stuff. You know, I wouldn't want to give this up for anything, you know. And when everyone's career comes to an end at some point, and when my career comes to an end, I hope it's a long time from now, you know. But I hope that I was able to, you know, show my appreciation for banana ball and, you know, really connect with fans and like show them that, you know, I do appreciate them, and without them, none of this is possible. But that's just the impact that I want to make. I want to spread happiness. I want people to smile because, you know, the world is mean. You know, there's some mean people out there and for no reason at all. And, you know, life's tough. You know, people go through some dark times. You know, we've all been there. I've had my bad times in my life, and I don't wish that upon anybody. And that's why I think that banana ball is such a great thing for the world. And it really upsets me when, you know, we get a lot of hate, you know, because the hate that we get isn't the hate that it isn't for the reasons why.
Oh no.
Man, right in the middle of a beautiful answer.
I know.
Uh-oh. Frank, you there?
Well, I'll tell you what, while we wait for him to potentially get back on, Tigers need some relief help. So if he's looking for one of those goals.
Okay. Sorry, Frank. You were in the middle of a beautiful answer and we lost you.
Yeah. I think the world is mean. You know, it's tough, and you know, it's just, that's why banana ball is so great, because we get to, you know, make people smile. And like I said before, like that's our job. You know, we're not trying to tell people that we're better than the major leagues. You know, we're not trying to be better baseball players than the major leaguers. You know, we're trying to make people happy. You know, that's all we're trying to do.
I think that's a great answer. So, Frank, I'm just going to end with some rapid fire questions, if that's okay.
Let's do it.
All right. Frank, favorite band?
Evanescence.
Ooh, nice.
Amy Lee, amazing.
Yeah.
Favorite vacation?
My winter ball opportunity in the Dominican Republic.
Ooh, never been there.
I went out to the Dominican Republic. I was there for 3 weeks. I got 0 appearances and I got released. So it was just a little vacation.
Well, at least it was nice there, right?
It was beautiful. I was at Casa de Campos. If you've never heard of it, look it up, and I'll probably never be able to afford that place on my own.
Drink of choice.
Orange soda. Chocolate milk. Boom.
Ooh, chocolate milk. That's a good one.
I don't like regular milk. I like chocolate milk though. That's a good choice.
Chocolate milk is the best.
Favorite sitcom of all time?
I don't know if I've ever watched. Is Friends a sitcom?
Yes.
Okay, let's go Friends.
All right, I like that. And favorite movie of all time?
Favorite movie of all time. Well, I have a tattoo from the movie called A Bronx Tale, because that's my dad's favorite movie. And he's always told me the saddest thing in life is wasted talent. The choices you make will shape you for the rest of your life. And I have the saddest thing in life is wasted talent tattooed on my ribs. And it's because it's his favorite movie. So I'll go A Bronx Tale.
Very nice. As the most tatted member of this show, I appreciate that.
Awesome. Love that.
Guys, any last questions for Frank before we let him get back to his night and probably going to sleep, because I'm sure he's got an early morning tomorrow.
We got practice at what time do I got to be there? Noon tomorrow.
Oh, so not that early.
Practice or,
yeah, I get to sleep.
Choreography.
So tomorrow we have baseball.
All right.
We don't have right now at the unless we have something that's like big coming up. We learn our choreography for the weekend on rehearsal day, which is the day before our first game. So like this week, I think we play Friday and Saturday. Yeah. So that Kristen Bell thing that we did on Saturday, we learned that on Thursday.
Crazy.
Wow.
See, that's a skill is being able to learn that quick.
Yeah. So that was also tougher for the new guys because that was in, I think it was 2023. That was the dance that the Bananas did every game. Like that was their like opening dance. So like they just added some things to it, but they were able to remember it like it was nothing. And I was like, oh no. But I also, they allow us to kind of place ourselves sometimes. So like the guys that understand the dance and like look good doing it, and like KJ and Noah Niznik, they are very good dancers. And, you know, they are always two guys that are in the front. And, you know, there's some guys that, you know, once in a while I'll know something. I'll try to put myself, you know, middle of the pack, you know, not right in the middle, like not right in front, but, you know, I'll try to be seen, you know, but if not, like you go and like hide in the back, you know, but at the same time, you still have to know what you're doing because, you know, you're still doing it live in front of 60,000 people, you know, and like there's cameras everywhere. So someone's going to be recording the dance from behind you and they're going to catch you. So I always do my best to learn it. I don't like to go hide. You know, even if I'm in the back, I'll learn something. I'll learn it and I'll still crush it, even though I'm in the back.
When you know it the best, get to the front and get yourself a prop. Just draw all the attention to yourself.
Exactly. The more you know.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Frank, thank you so much for joining us. This has been an incredibly fun episode. We're learning a lot about Banana Ball as we continue to talk to people like you and Dakota that we had on a few days ago. Frank Moscatiello, right-handed pitcher for the Savannah Bananas. We can't thank you enough. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I had a great time.
Thank you.